Number 16. Lemuria, Kumari Kondam. In 1864, the scientific world had a massive problem. Zoologists found lemur fossils in Madagascar and lemur fossils in India, but not a single bone in Africa, which sits right in the middle. It was a biological teleportation glitch. To solve it, a British zoologist named Philip Sclater proposed a radical solution, a massive submerged land bridge that once connected India to Madagascar, bypassing Africa entirely. He named this lost continent Lemuria. The record for this land isn't just Victorian science, it matches the ancient Tamil literature of Kumari Kondam. These texts describe a vast cradle of civilization continent south of India that was ruled by Pandyan kings for 10,000 years before being seized by the ocean in a violent cataclysm. For decades, Lemuria wasn't fringe theory, it was standard textbook science. It appeared on maps, and occultists like Madame Blavatsky claimed it was the home of a root race of humanity that possessed a third eye. The twist is that Lemuria was killed by a better theory, plate tectonics. We figured out that continents don't sink, they drift. India and Madagascar were once touching, but they split apart and moved. Science deleted the continent, but it couldn't delete the Tamil cultural memory of a drowned homeland. But while Lemuria was a bridge across the Indian Ocean, our next record was a stepping stone across the Atlantic.
Number 15. Antillia. Before Columbus sailed to America, he wasn't staring into the empty unknown. He was staring at a map that promised him a safety net. That safety net was Antillia, a massive rectangular island sitting right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The record comes from 15th century nautical charts, where Antillia was depicted as a real, tangible place, often called the Island of the Seven Cities. The evidence for its existence was so accepted that the King of Portugal authorized expeditions specifically to claim it. The legend stated that during the Muslim conquest of Spain in 714 AD, 7 Christian bishops fled by ship and landed on this island, burning their vessels to prevent anyone from returning. They built 7 cities of gold and piety. When Columbus pitched his voyage, he actually planned to stop at Antillia to rest and resupply before hitting Asia. He literally bet his life on this island being there. The twist is that when ships finally sailed those coordinates, they found nothing but deep blue water. Antillia was likely a cartographic error, a mirage of the Azores, or a ghost island created to fill the terrifying emptiness of the map. It was a psychological crutch for sailors. But if Antillia was a phantom island, our next record describes a phantom supercontinent that obsession kept alive for 1,000 years.
Number 14. Terra Australis Incognita. If you look at any map of the world from the Renaissance, you will see a monster hiding at the bottom of the globe. It isn't Antarctica. It is a colossal supercontinent called Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. The record here isn't an explorer's log, it is a philosophical mandate from Aristotle and Ptolemy. They argued that the Earth had to be balanced. Since there was so much heavy landmass in the northern hemisphere, Europe and Asia, there had to be an equal amount of land in the south to keep the planet from toppling over into the void. The core evidence was so convincing that this imaginary continent appeared on official maps for over 1,500 years. It wasn't depicted as ice, it was shown as a green, habitable landmass, sometimes even connected to South America or Australia. It was the holy grail of navigation. Captain James Cook was sent on his famous voyages not just to look at stars, but to find this massive counterweight continent. He sailed further south than anyone before him, crossing the Antarctic Circle, slicing through the empty ocean where this giant landmass was supposed to be. The twist is that the land was there, but it wasn't the paradise the philosophers promised. Cook eventually deduced that the southern land was locked behind a wall of impenetrable ice. We found the continent, but it was a frozen tomb, not a counterbalance. The mapmakers were right about the gravity, but wrong about the life. But while the southern land was a product of logic, our next lost kingdom was a product of a lie that fooled every king in Europe. Number 13, the kingdom of Prester John. In the 12th century, a mysterious letter arrived at the courts of Rome and Constantinople that changed the course of history. It was signed by Prester John, a Christian king ruling a massive, wealthy empire somewhere in the Three Indias. The letter described a land where honey flowed from the ground, where there were no poor people, and where a magic mirror allowed the king to see every province in his empire to prevent injustice. For 400 years, this record was treated as absolute geopolitical fact. The evidence of this belief is staggering. European powers launched real diplomatic missions and diverted crusades specifically to link up with Prester John's armies to fight Islam from both sides. Maps from the Middle Ages place his kingdom vividly in Asia, and later, as explorers failed to find him there, the location moved to Ethiopia. The Portuguese spent decades sailing around Africa specifically to find this man. He was the Superman of the Middle Ages, the savior who was always just over the next horizon.
The twist is that the letter was a forgery, likely a piece of propaganda written by a Western monk to boost morale during the Crusades. There was no magic mirror, and there was no Prester John. It was the longest-running wild goose chase in human history. Europe spent centuries hunting for a phantom ally. But while Prester John was a fantasy that refused to die, our next record describes a superpower that died in a single day.
Number 12, Atlantis. It is the ultimate cold case of the ancient world. We aren't talking about a village that burned down. We are talking about a superpower that was deleted from the face of the earth. The record here isn't a fairy tale. It comes from Plato, the father of Western philosophy, who swore he was transmitting a literal historical account. He described a civilization of alternating rings of water and land, a naval empire of godlike power that existed 9,000 years before his own time. According to the text, this wasn't a slow decline. It was a civilization larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined that vanished in a single terrifying day and night of misfortune. The core evidence lies in the suspicious precision of the details. Plato didn't just say it was a big city. He described the engineering of the canals, the color of the stones, black, white, and red, and the mining of a mysterious fire-like metal called orichalcum. He placed it specifically beyond the pillars of Heracles or Gibraltar. This level of granular detail is usually reserved for eyewitness testimony, not allegory. For 2,000 years, explorers have mapped the ocean floor looking for these specific rings, convinced that a Bronze Age metropolis is waiting under the pressure of the Atlantic. The twist is that modern geology has scanned the Atlantic floor, and it is effectively empty. Most scholars now agree Plato was remixing the memory of the Minoan eruption on Thera to teach a lesson about arrogance. But even if the continent is a lie, the fear is real. The story of Atlantis isn't just about a lost city. It's a cultural PTSD, a permanent reminder that no matter how advanced we become, nature can hit the reset button whenever it wants. And that fear of the unknown extends to the very edges of the map, to a place where the ocean itself turns into ice. Number 11, Thule. Around 330 BC, a Greek explorer named Pytheas did the unthinkable. He sailed off the edge of the map. He returned with records that sounded like the ramblings of a madman. He claimed to have reached Thule, a place 6 days' sail north of Britain where the laws of physics seemed to break down. He described a land where the sun refused to set, and the ocean was neither water nor ice, but a jellyfish-like slush that bound the sea and sky together, impossible to walk on or sail through. For the Romans, Ultima Thule became shorthand for the end of reality. But the core evidence suggests Pytheas was actually the greatest explorer of antiquity. His description of the slushy sea is a perfect account of pancake ice found at the chaotic edge of the Arctic pack. His astronomical data on the sun's position was shockingly accurate for the Arctic Circle. He wasn't lying. He was just the first Mediterranean mind to witness the frozen hostility of the polar north. The twist is that the Romans dismissed his accurate report as fantasy because it didn't fit their worldview. Thule was real, likely Norway or Iceland, but it was rejected by science for centuries. Pytheas saw a frozen hell, but strangely other ancient legends insisted that if he had just pushed a little further, he wouldn't have frozen. He would have found a paradise. Number 10, Hyperborea. According to the ancient records of Herodotus and the poet Pindar, the North Pole wasn't a wasteland. It was the location of Hyperborea, literally beyond the north wind. The logic was simple. The freezing north wind came from the Riphean Mountains. If you could cross those mountains, you would be behind the wind, in a land of eternal stillness. The texts describe a place where the sun shone 24 hours a day, fruit ripened quickly, and a race of giants lived in a state of constant euphoria, free from disease and aging. The evidence is bafflingly specific. The Greeks insisted that the Hyperboreans were real trade partners who sent gifts wrapped in straw to the island of Delos. The description of the midnight sun, light that lasts 24 hours, is a physical reality of the Arctic summer. The ancients knew about the polar day, but they couldn't reconcile it with the polar cold. So they invented a microclimate that defied the laws of thermodynamics, a tropical garden hiding inside the polar ice cap. The twist, of course, is that while the midnight sun is real, the tropical paradise is a meteorological impossibility. It was likely a Golden Age myth projected onto a geography they didn't understand. But while Hyperborea was protected by magic mountains, our next lost land was destroyed by the very thing that was supposed to protect it. Number 9, Lioness. If you stand at Land's End in Cornwall and look out toward the Scilly Isles, local folklore says you are staring at a crime scene. This is the site of Lioness, the lost land of Arthurian legend.
The records describe a fertile, low-lying kingdom containing 140 villages and 111 churches that once connected Cornwall to the Scilly Isles. According to the chronicles, a catastrophic flood swallowed the entire kingdom in a single night in 1099, with only a man named Trevelyan escaping on a white horse, a symbol that remains on local family crests to this day. The core evidence here is that the map actually matches the myth. Geologists confirmed that the Isles of Scilly were once a single large island. In the shallow waters between the isles, divers and archaeologists have found ancient field walls and stone boundaries that are now submerged. The record is a folk memory of rising sea levels that turned a kingdom into an archipelago. The land really did drown. The people really did lose their homes. The twist is the timeline. It wasn't a single Hollywood-style tsunami in 1099. It was a slow, grinding marine transgression over thousands of years. The cataclysm was likely a massive storm surge that simply finished off the last low-lying marshes. It is a very real lost land, stripped of its magic by the slow violence of climate change. But while Lyonesse drowned, another British island vanished to become a sanctuary for the dead.
Number 8. Avalon. Avalon is the holy grail of mythical geography. This is the island where King Arthur was taken to heal after his final battle. The primary record comes from Geoffrey of Monmouth's 1136 history, where he calls it the Isle of Apples. He describes it as an otherworldly paradise ruled by the enchantress Morgan Le Fay, a place where crops grow without farmers and people live in a state of suspended agelessness. It is the Celtic version of heaven, but grounded on earth. The evidence for Avalon is a mix of opportunism and geography. In 1191, monks at Glastonbury Abbey claimed they found a lead cross and a hollow log coffin containing the bones of Arthur and Guinevere. Glastonbury Tor, a strange terraced hill rising out of the Somerset marshlands, was indeed an island in ancient times when the surrounding area was flooded. The Celtic word abalo links to apples, and the region is famous for them. The geography of an island within the land fits the legend perfectly. The twist is that the discovery of the bones was almost certainly a medieval hoax designed to raise tourist money for the abbey after a fire. Avalon was likely never a physical place, but a spiritual otherworld imposed on the landscape. It represents the hope that the hero isn't dead, just sleeping. But while the English were looking for spiritual hope, the Spanish were about to drive themselves insane looking for physical gold. Number 7. The Seven Cities of Gold. In 1539, a friar named Marcos de Niza stumbled out of the Arizona desert with a story that would ruin thousands of lives. He claimed to have seen Cibola, one of the legendary 7 cities of gold. He reported a city larger than Mexico City, shimmering in the distance, with doorways made of turquoise. This confirmed an old medieval legend that 7 bishops had fled Spain to found a utopian paradise in the west. The evidence was strong enough to convince the Spanish crown to launch the massive Coronado expedition. Thousands of men marched in steel armor through the blistering heat of the American Southwest. What they found at the coordinates was the Zuni pueblo of Hawiku. There was no gold. There were no turquoise doors. It was a modest complex of adobe and stone. The shimmering gold the friar saw was likely the sunset hitting the mica-flecked mud walls, creating a dazzling optical illusion. The twist is highly controversial. Historians say Friar Marcos was a liar or a victim of a mirage, but alternative researchers suggest he might have been speaking metaphorically about the spiritual richness of the Zuni people, and the soldiers simply heard what they wanted to hear. What do you think? Was the friar a con man or a misunderstood mystic? Let me know in the comments. Either way, the failure to find Cibola didn't stop the greed, it just pushed it deeper into the jungle. Number 6. El Dorado. El Dorado is the most famous hallucination in history. The record didn't start with a city, but a man. Indigenous tribes told the Spanish about a king who dusted his body in gold and dove into Lake Guatavita to wash it off, offering emeralds to the gods. This was El Hombre Dorado, the Golden Man. But as the story traveled, the Golden Man mutated into a golden city and finally into a golden empire hidden in the Amazon. The evidence of the ritual is 100% real. We have recovered golden rafts and artifacts that depict this exact ceremony. However, European explorers like Sir Walter Raleigh took this truth and inflated it into a city called Manoa on the shores of a massive lake called Lake Pyrenae. This lake appeared on official maps for over 100 years. It was a geographical ghost. Countless expeditions vanished into the rainforest hunting for a metropolis that was actually just a distorted game of telephone. The twist is that the lost city was never lost because it never existed as a city. The conquistadors were chasing a noun when they should have been looking for a verb. They died for a misunderstanding. And speaking of misunderstandings, the Greeks believed that if you sailed west, you wouldn't find the Amazon, you would find the afterlife. Number 5. The Fortunate Isles. In the Greek mindset, the afterlife wasn't another dimension, it was a vacation spot in the Atlantic Ocean. The Fortunate Isles, or Isles of the Blessed, were recorded by poets like Hesiod. This was a physical place where the heroes of the Trojan War were sent to live forever.
The records describe a temperate climate, soft breezes, and soil that produced 3 harvests a year without labor. It was a paradise located on the literal edge of the world. The evidence suggests this wasn't just poetry, it was a travel brochure. The Phoenicians and Carthaginians almost certainly reached the Macronesian archipelagos, Madeira, and the Canary Islands. The description of the eternal spring and the rich volcanic soil matches the Canary Islands perfectly. The Roman general Sertorius was so compelled by these records that he considered abandoning his army to retire there. The twist is that the Greeks took a sailor's report of a pleasant island climate and elevated it into a theological necessity. They needed a place for their heroes to go, so they colonized the map with their mythology. But while the Greeks looked for paradise in the water, the people of Arabia knew that a great civilization could be swallowed by the sand.
Number 4. Iram of the Pillars. This is the Atlantis of the sands. The record is the Quran itself, which speaks of Iram of the Pillars, a city of the odd people that was unlike anything else in the world. They were wealthy, powerful, and arrogant. As punishment for their hubris, a divine windstorm buried the entire city under the shifting sands of the empty quarter, erasing it from the map. For centuries, this was dismissed as a fable, but in the 1990s, the narrative changed. Using space shuttle radar data, archaeologists identified ancient caravan tracks converging on a specific point in the remote desert of Oman. Excavations at the site, Ubar, revealed a massive fortress with octagonal towers, pillars, that had collapsed into a giant sinkhole. The city had literally fallen into the earth when it drained its underground water table dry. The twist is a debate between science and scripture. We found the ruins, but they were destroyed by bad water management, not a supernatural wind. However, some theorists argue that Ubar is too small to be the magnificent Iram, and the real city of pillars is still out there, hidden under the dunes using technology we don't understand. Is Ubar the real deal or just a decoy? While Iram was swallowed by the earth, our next island was swallowed by the mist. Number 3. High Brazil. If you look at nautical charts from the 1300s all the way to the 1860s, you will see a large island off the west coast of Ireland called High Brazil. This wasn't a scribbled myth, it was a navigational fact for 5 centuries. The records are filled with sailors who claimed to see it. Captain John Nisbet claimed in 1674 that he landed there and met an old magician who gave him silver. The legend stated the island was shrouded in mist and only became solid once every 7 years. The evidence is baffling because the island isn't there. But geologists know that a shoal called the Porcupine Bank exists exactly where the maps put High Brazil. During the last ice age, this was a real island. It is highly probable that High Brazil is a fata morgana, a complex mirage that projects images of coastlines or distant objects, making them appear solid. Sailors were seeing the optical ghost of a land that drowned 10,000 years ago. The twist is that we kept the island on our maps until 1865. We wanted it to be there. It was a phantom that lived in the collective imagination of the British Navy. But while High Brazil was a trick of the light, our next city was a casualty of the devil. Number 2. Ys. In the folklore of Brittany, France, the city of Ys is a dark obsession. The record tells of King Gradlon, who built a magnificent city below sea level, protected by a massive dike. The key to the sluice gates hung around his neck. The city was a marvel of wealth, but his daughter, Dahut, turned it into a den of sin. The legend says a stranger, the devil, tricked Dahut into stealing the key while her father slept. She opened the gates, and the ocean rushed in, drowning the city instantly. The core evidence is the geology of the Breton coast. Roman roads in the area literally stop at the water's edge. Underwater ruins and walls have been found in the Bay of Douarnenez. The region has suffered from significant land subsidence over the last 2 millennia. The legend of Ys is a mythologized version of a real engineering failure, a dike breach during a storm that wiped out a low-lying Roman-era settlement. The twist is the moral framing. The city didn't fall because of a wicked woman. It fell because fighting the ocean is a losing battle. It is a warning about building on the edge of disaster. But if Ys is a warning, our final record is the origin of all desire. Number 1. The Garden of Eden, Dilmun. The Garden of Eden is usually dismissed as a metaphor, but before the Bible, there was the Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh. This text describes a place called Dilmun. This wasn't a fairy tale, it was a trade partner. The Sumerians described it as a land where the sun rises, a place of purity where lions did not kill and sickness did not exist. It was the land where the hero Gilgamesh traveled to find the secret of eternal life. The evidence is an archaeological smoking gun. We have identified Dilmun as the island of Bahrain. In ancient times, Bahrain was a geological miracle. Freshwater aquifers bubbled up from beneath the saltwater ocean, creating a lush green paradise in the middle of an arid region. It was literally living water.
The island is covered in the world's largest prehistoric cemetery. Hundreds of thousands of people requested to be buried there to be close to the sacred land. The twist is that the garden was real, but it wasn't supernatural. It was a commercial hub with a great water supply. The fall of man was likely the drying up of the climate. The aquifers depleted, the garden withered, and humanity was expelled by the harsh reality of nature. We weren't kicked out by angels, we were evicted by ecology.
Number 0. Bonus, the Hollow Earth, Agartha. Before you go, there is one record that refuses to die, describing a land that science says is physically impossible. This is Agartha. The record comes from diverse sources, from Buddhist teachings of Shambhala to the alleged diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd. In 1947, Byrd supposedly flew over the North Pole and radioed that he saw not ice, but green forests, mountain ranges, and woolly mammoths grazing in a warm valley inside the Earth. The evidence, or rather the obsession, is strange. Edmund Halley, the genius who predicted the comet, mathematically argued that the Earth consisted of hollow shells to explain magnetic anomalies. The Nazis were obsessed with finding the entrance. Ancient cultures, from the Hopi to the Tibetans, speak of inner Earth civilizations that retreated underground to escape cataclysms. The twist is that seismology proves the Earth is solid and molten. P-waves don't lie. But the idea of the hollow Earth persists because we hate the idea that there are no more frontiers. We have mapped the surface, so we invent a new world inside the core. It is the last refuge of the explorer's soul. From continents that vanish to islands that are just optical illusions, our history is a map of things that should be there but aren't. Which of these lost lands do you think has the best chance of being real? If you want to see how these myths connect to the darkest timeline of human history, you need to click this video right here. It explains the one mystery we didn't touch on today. Click it, and I'll see you there.